That out-of-control wildfire in Yosemite, now one of the biggest in California history. It is roughly the size of Chicago, so big they can see it on the International Space Station.
It's very difficult to express the power of a wildfire. As it came up over the horizon behind me here, it just was a giant wall of red. Now, this is Dante's Inferno. There's just nothing that is going to stop this.
I saw this 20,000-foot column of smoke rise up like an atomic bomb. At that point, I knew this thing had gone from a bad fire to a Holocaust. Arizona, New Mexico, Colorado, and California are experiencing these catastrophic fires.
Our landscapes are at significant risk. We're seeing large fires in landscapes born and bred of fire now being destroyed by fire.
The Rim Fire was a really good example of where a lot of scientists and forest managers believe wildfire is headed, which is to these really large size events, what's being termed megafires.
As the largest forest fire in California history blazed across 250,000 acres in Yosemite National Park and the Stanislaus National Forest, it became clear this was a different kind of wildfire, and the devastation in its wake had implications for the entire country.
So this is an example of one of the hot burned areas that's typical of this rim fire. It incinerated everything that was on the forest floor. It incinerated the bushes, the small trees, and it killed everything in the overstory, in the canopy. There are no trees in this entire 4.5-mile area that are left. All the old trees have been killed.
You know, there's nothing good that happened out of large portions of the rim fire. No seeds, no trees, no nutrients in the soil are left because the fire was so hot. That's just a tragic loss.
This rim fire truly was a devastating, catastrophic event for the effects on just the web of life that's now so disrupted out there. There's been some tragic losses that will not easily be replaced, even in many lifetimes.
So remember, only you can prevent forest fires.
For decades, we've had one of the most effective advertising outreach messages out there, one that the Forest Service is rightfully very proud of, Smokey Bear.
We can count on you to do what Smokey says.
Only you can prevent forest fires.
It is a very emphatic message. The problem is fire is inevitable in these forests. We have a history of putting fires out, and we've come to understand, particularly over the last several decades, that many of these forests evolve with frequent low-intensity fire.
Many, many years of fire suppression prevents these smaller trees from being thinned by fire, and so consequently, when we remove fire from the landscape, this is what you see. These are the small trees that can cause tremendous amount of damage to the overstory trees that we're really trying to protect.
In many areas, the rim fire burned with low to moderate intensity, restoring healthy conditions to the forest, releasing seeds for new growth, and clearing out space for wildlife and large trees.
In this part of the forest, you can really see how the fire came through in a much less severe way. If you look at the base of many of these trees, it was just an underburn that came through here. You can see how it took out the little trees, which really is what we want to happen.
What no one wanted to happen was the high-intensity fire that torched more than 90,000 acres.
It was one giant fuse waiting for the other end to be lit, and it led right to prime forest land.
The fuels have built up so much, it just causes incineration.
What's going on in the background of all of this is you have climate change, which is constantly pushing the conditions to be drier, the fuels to be drier, the weather to be more extreme.
Instead of absorbing carbon from the atmosphere, which slows global warming, the forest released the equivalent of 1.2 billion gallons of gas during the Rim Fire, sending a plume of smoke from California to Canada and the Gulf of Mexico.
There's a lesson to be learned. We need to do more prescribed burning combined with thinning treatments, combined with shredding and other treatments of brush areas. If we could have had lighter, prescribed burns, low intensity that came through that reduced the fuels, what a great benefit that would have been in contrast to the huge amount of carbon that was released by this fire.
One response to the dangerous combination of climate change and fuel buildup is to use fire to restore forest health.
The Rim Fire did not come into this area because there really isn't the continuity of fuels after a prescribed fire. So it really limits the severity and the intensity of a wildfire when it approaches a prescribed fire. It just has nothing left to burn.
The problem with prescribed fire is that where there's fire, there's smoke.
We know for sure that air quality and impacts of smoke to airports and schools and communities is a significant effect that we're going to see into the future. But if we don't accept some of that now, we're going to pay for it down the road in the Rim Fires.
And what's going to happen if you keep fire out of the system is that eventually, when the wildfire does occur, it's going to release a lot more carbon into the atmosphere. And furthermore, the smoke that it puts out, you're not going to have any control when that smoke happens and where it goes.
Plans to manage the burn area after the Rim Fire raised issues that often become contentious.
There's a lot of decisions that have to get made about whether you would go in and you might salvage log some areas, you might not salvage log other areas. Where are you going to concentrate your replanting area? But as long as the special interests or the people focused on one particular aspect of the forest continue to fight with each other, it means that very little gets done.
There's always conflict in land management. There always has been, there always will be. But the important piece is to understand that it's not just about timber harvesting or grazing or a particular mammal or a bird. It all comes into play in a very dynamic way.
Everyone here who has a fire background will look and see this is fuel loading.
What's happening now in the community that is encouraging is the folks that are fairly far over on the environmental side and the folks that are fairly far over on the let's make use of this forest side are talking to one another.
This fire brought our community together. We formed this group. It's called Yosemite Stanislaus Solutions, YSS. We've got cattle ranchers, we've got miners, loggers, timber industry folks, several environmental groups, the Audubon Society, Sierra Club, Forest Service.
County supervisor are represented, there are business interests, all of us together thinking what can be done to help restore this area that is burned so intensely.
We're really now dealing with the aftermath of a megafire, and having that YSS collaborative group help us figure out what those next steps are and make the right investments in the most critical parts of the landscape. The best thing that we can do in trying to plan for how we manage this landscape is to make the forest most resilient to the kinds of changes that might be coming in the future.
There's been an awful lot of work to put in an appropriate initial recovery system, and it was good. What I fear is that the fire is going to become old news, and we'll move on to whatever the next concern is, and that desire to learn from this may evaporate over time.
I think we can make some change. And you know, that's what I hope for. For the rest of my career, that's what I'm going to be about, is trying to work toward positive change on all sides so that we can better manage these forests so our kids have the legacy that we had.
The rimfire was a warning sign. About a century ago, fire suppression became the norm in the national forest. Of the largest wildfires in the continental United States over the last 100 years, 80% have occurred since the year 2000. While still exceptional, megafires strike with increased frequency and destructiveness. They are the fire next time.
It took us 100 years to get here. I hope it doesn't take us 100 years to get out of this, but we need to think in that sense of urgency and that magnitude. We need to take action now.
The question is, do we have the wherewithal and the stick-to-itness to be able to keep at that for long enough to put in policies that really will change the way we manage the forest?
And if we make that conscious decision and we become more proactive rather than reactive, we can create the forest conditions that we know are resilient, that sustain the ecosystem services, the carbon, the water, the hydropower, all the resources and the benefits that we like to get out of forests. Right now, we're at a tipping point, and we need to consciously make that decision one way or the other.